hello everybody. I'm here today with our James.
Hi. Thanks.
Yes, how are you, James?
Surviving.
Yeah, that's the word, isn't it? Survival. James has asked me to put this picture up, and he's got a cross on him. So, explain the picture, James.
Right. There was something that sort of bugged me for a long time, and that is how can the Gaelic language and Hebrew have 452 common words?
What, the same?
Yeah, basically.
Right.
So it's like, well, there's a common denominator amongst all this. So if you go over to South America, these Toltecs, and then Mayans and Aztecs, it all revolves around sun worship. Then, obviously, with Christianity, you've got the Son of God. And then also with Hebrew, you've got the Son of God. And again, with Egypt, you've got Akhenaten and all about Ra, the sun god. And it's like, well, there's a common theme there. So what you've actually got, it's often talked about this missing 1,000 years of history. Well, it is and it isn't. Time-wise, the 1,000 years is not missing. The actual history is missing.
So this picture we're showing is more Aztec, isn't it?
It's Quetzalcoatl.
What's that then?
That's the feathered serpent.
Oh, is that good or not good then? He's got a cross on him.
Yeah, the ones in Peru that died of snake bite got a cross. The serpent is associated with wisdom. The early Portuguese and Spanish made a lot of notes, and one of these kings, I think it's the Aztecs, he's carried everywhere, his feet don't touch the ground, he's completely covered in white feathers. And so are the four that are carrying him. Basically, Quetzalcoatl means plumed serpent. It goes by another name of Amaru, which is how you get America. So what you've got is a situation, if you can imagine the British Empire at its height, and then the British Isles sinks. So you're left with large sort of areas, large colonies, as well as a lot of smaller ones. So without that sort of centre hub, as it were, they're sort of, shall we say, left to their own devices, having to sort of rebuild their communication with each other. Now you can see a similar pattern in a very short space of time with the way English and American English has slightly diverged on certain words, so pavement and sidewalk, rubbish and trash, and this type of thing. So that sort of gives you an example of how a common language has changed. That's with communication, but we're talking in a time where there probably was a loss of communication. I mean, we've got definite dates of the cataclysm. So you've got the 2239 BC flood. Then you've got the 1687 BC flood, which is the Aegean Sea. That's when the Mediterranean was created. And then
what about the flood from the two rivers or seas that are up on the top by Everest? Is it the Goulash? There's two of them up there that you can see that they cascaded down into China and over the Middle East. But there used to be two seas up there. But anyway, carry on, James.
So then you've got another big one in 721 BC, and I'm pretty sure it's around that time that the Roman Empire comes about.
Yes, see, I have the League of I call them the League of Gentlemen, but whoever they were far more advanced. That's Tartaria, what we call Tartaria, the big houses, pneumatic trains, the whole thing. It was that lot. Then a big floods come. Because, you know, it is somewhere in the 1700s, but they draw maps in the late 1700s which shows Scotland twice the size it is, and it actually almost meets Ireland. So they'd have a little crossing like the Isle of Wight to the Isle of Wight. It'd have been a little crossing like that. And now hundreds of miles of Scotland has disappeared into the sea.
Well, you've got a series of cataclysms. I mean, they're not the only ones. They're the three sort of real big ones. 522 was another one which would have affected Europe. You've also got, as they point out, continuously changing coastlines with tidal movements anyway. So some areas will have eroding coastlines, other ones will be gaining. So constantly the thing's changing anyway. But this sort of goes right back. So the first one, the real big one in 2239 BC, that's this collapse of the vapor canopy. You've got basically up to the sort of biblical Noah's flood, you've got 1,656 years, which is interesting because it's the inverse of the building blocks of DNA, which is 10,565, which is where you get, it's from the Hebrew letters, which is YHVH, which is Yahweh, or Yahweh, Jehovah. All comes from that numeric sequence.
Right.
I thought that was interesting that you've got 1056 years, but you've got 10565 on the building blocks of DNA. It's like the one is the inverse of the other. So without this centre of an empire, there'd be remnants left. So somewhere the size of Australia, South Africa, and even India. The real big ones would probably...
Yeah, because a lot of Malaysia's disappeared underwater, like three-quarters of Scotland. It was bigger. We were much bigger island. Even around Cumbria. We were about a third bigger.
Yeah.
And this bit, like, it's just incredible to think they drew these maps showing that Scotland met Ireland almost, except for a little boat trip across. And now there's nothing but miles of sea to get to Scotland. What happened? That would have caused a great big tsunami, wouldn't it? If the maps are true and it was showing this land that isn't there anymore and it just collapsed into the sea. Because something's happened to Scotland. We've lost half of Scotland. Scotland would have been as big as England.
Well, it's the entire world. It's not just Scotland. Water is the key from both perspectives on what you perceive as the good side and the bad side, because obviously water is the life giver, but too much of it and you automatically got a way of herding people into smaller land areas by rising sea levels. You annihilate a lot of people, but then those that are left are sort of herded into much smaller land areas than they once would have had, because the picture that sort of emerges is it's said to have been a land bridge between India and Australia at one time. So you'd have probably only had
where? India and where?
India and Australia.
Yeah, that I did that video. I don't know if you saw that one where, you know, older maps like the ones of England and like those ones show that California, the end of California is not there, but people have to remember it was owned by somebody else and maybe they just didn't fit it in for that reason. But, yeah, Australia and Malaysia, they were all connected and now it's gone. just like Scotland. So it was probably quite a hefty, unless it was mining and the mining's caused it.
You've got you're left with remnants of something that once was, which is basically Atlantis. You've got the description of Atlantis of basically being concentric circles is exactly the same way you would lay out teepees or even a town or city map. You have a centre and everything sort of radiates out from that. So the pattern today is no different. But also the other part with where Plato talks about Atlantis is talking about the 5 races. And they seem to have gone off in different directions. And what would you call the Aryans have ended up in Ireland, hence you've got Era.
And the Moors.
They come into this as well, yes. So the Moors really are your darker skinned Indians. I mean, it's no...
Oh, so that means Dave Murphy, because he's a Moor, he was an Indian. He thinks, wow, really?
No, the Moors actually come from the Americans.
Oh, right. In his history, when he found out about it, they lived in Ireland and they weren't slaves, they owned land, which is totally different because they said that these people couldn't own any land, but they did. So they weren't slaves like they said they were.
No. Anyway,
and,
so...
without sounding, I don't know, I hate saying it this way because I just say coloured people, but then no, that's incorrect. So we'll say black people. Couple of messages, they're just saying it used to be it was covered in black people, and the white people have come from somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that later.
Oh, okay, you carry on, James. I'm shutting up.
With the description of these cataclysms, you've got this fire dragon in the sky that drops red rain. So, probably after numerous cataclysms and things, the remnants of the arts, the sciences, the spiritual and everything have ended up in Ireland. Now that word you said, Tartarian. Tar means west. So a Tartarian means a far westerner.
So that'd be America, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that definitely comes into it and ties into it. So in Ireland, the centre of the sun worship and the source of the Bible was actually a place called Tara. It's now called Tara Hill, and obviously you're not allowed to dig. it's a mound, but that was the sort of true pontiff. It was sun worship, and it was seen as a sort of the sun as a personified form, which is basically Quetzalcoatl, all the white feathers. This is where you've got this whole depictions of Jesus dressed in white. So, as this true sort of world religion of Atlantis has spread, it's ended up with colonies and things, one of which being Rome. Now, Rome actually takes its name from a compound of 2 Gaelic words. Ro means before.
Is this the Roman? Is this about the Roman?
Hold on. Rome takes its name from a Gaelic word. It was a colony of this church of Aisa. So the Ro in Gaelic means before, and Orm means body, heart, body, earth, or grave. So fused together, you've got the word Rome. Now, where this other group have come from, these usurpers, it's almost like they've gone and followed the setting sun, whereas the sort of Atlantis sun worship is always facing and going towards the sun. So you've ended up with places like Angkor Wat and the Great Pyramid of Giza and various other things. But the closest to the Atlantis buildings are actually in South America. They've just found, well, since 2018, using LiDAR, in Guatemala, they've found thousands of settlements. One is the size of Las Vegas with all these interconnected
yeah,
railways.
abandoned.
Yeah, so what's basically happened is you've got, now, we call them Romans, but bear in mind there's a thing called a Roman node. I'm going to leave it there because it sort of becomes a... Basically, what Rome has done, they have usurped this original, what would have been from Atlantis that's ended up in Ireland, that they've usurped it and basically claimed it as their own and basically turned everything around. So a lot of these martyrs are actually the ones that opposed Rome, that they've burnt to death and then switched it around and made it one of theirs, because they've got to create a fabricated backstory to justify their existence.
Yeah.
And through various subterfuge and trickery, rewriting of history, this is why the Bible was always sort of, you had these councils of priests and things always done behind closed doors. So it's basically like ends up like science as a peer-reviewed paper. Actually, incidentally, while I think of it, the nature of this system that you've got is just follows textbook narcissism. One of the things with narcissism is to create a codependent. So now think about how many people could honestly put their hand up and say, I grow my own food, I don't need anything from the system. So they've created codependence.
Yeah, we live in a nanny state, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, so the plan of Rome has always been to usurp Ireland. And if you look at Europe, Ireland stands out as the one that has had the most difficulty, the most persecuted people, the population being sort of decimated from between 8 and 10 million.
Potato famine. They all moved to America.
Well, not from choice, those that survived. But for Rome to pull off the operation, their direct approach didn't work. So this sort of supposed collapse of the Roman Empire, that's why they only got as far as Hadrian's Wall. That wall was to keep them out, not to let... It wasn't the Romans building it to stop the...
but there's another one further up, James.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a second wall, second line of defence. So by the time you've got to Constantine, it's sort of come about that sort of the Roman Church has become autonomous. Now it's using its wealth and it's bribing people. So you've got Olaf of Norway, who basically said to his people, you're either join and fight in the battles, or you'll convert to Christianity. So most people took the easier option. So they've used bribery and trickery, and it's always been this attack against Ireland. Once they decimated that, see, the Greeks say they don't know where they got their wisdom and everything from. Well, again, that comes from Ireland. All the root words of everything in the Bible all come from God. Now, I think I'm going to go as far as say that Gaelic, Irish Gaelic, is probably the language that was spoken in Atlantis and possibly even written.
Not here then, James, just Ireland we're talking about, the Emerald Isle.
Well, England would have been a sort of, Well, it would have been joined anyway at one time.
It almost
Only
was
separated.
through Scotland and Ireland.
Well, probably at one time, the whole of the British Wales was.
Oh, you mean with the Isle of Man? The Isle of Man, that one, that would have been part of the mainland.
Yeah, that's just the highest point that has survived.
Quite a big flood then.
Yeah,
The old maps don't
floods.
show that. They show the Isle of Man there, but they show Scotland almost touching Ireland, and now it's hundreds of miles have been lost. Hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah. So you've got in Rome, you've got the River Tiber, which takes its name from the Tuber, which is an island. You've got Tara, which is the centre. Hence, you've got Tartan. Now, the Irish, being on that western edge, are also very good seafarers. They are your Phoenicians. The Finn part is again a Gaelic word. It's a Gaelic word meaning the sun. And
Yeah.
it's basically it basically means seafarer.
Yeah, the Romen.
They're the opposite. They're the usurpers, basically. They're basically just trying to take control. So the irony of it is, the Christianity that you've got today is actually destroying the original Christianity, this Aisa. This is where the I and the J thing comes in as well, because there is no J in Gaelic. So basically, when you see these dates carved into the wall, they've basically just extended the one. It's basically claiming it as part of Rome, no longer part of Aisa. The Aisa part has been morphed into IHS, which you'll see on headstones and things as well. But that's said to come from the Greek letter H that looks like an E. But the Greek comes from Gaelic as well. There's also another connection between Greece and Florida, quite a big one. You end up with, you have this situation where you've got too many parallels. So you've got the Fertile Crescent, which is the Gulf of Mexico, and you'll also see you've got a pattern. You've got a mirrored pattern. You've got the Gulf War, and you've got the Gulf of Mexico. You've got the Dead Sea with its high salt content, and then you've got Salt Lake. And you can even take the Nile and you can flip it up the other way and then mirror it and overlay it on the Mississippi, and you've got the same river. Follows the same course. I suspect that the Moors actually take their name because they moor wherever they went. They're basically the Phoenicians as well. This is also why.
Is that why maritime law was brought in then, James?
Sorry?
You just said they could go wherever they wanted. Is that why they brought maritime law in, to stop them?
No, that's just their sort of twist on things. But no, Moors probably, it's like if you saw a load of football supporters and they're wearing a team's colours, you would call them, I don't know, West Ham supporters or something. And you refer to them by that name, but it doesn't tell you anything about them. So I would imagine the first visual thing you'd see about what are called the Moors would be the fact that they moor their ships wherever they go. They connect into this as well. See, once the Moors have been driven out of Spain, Columbus and the Vatican, and they knew about the Americans. The Irish had been, which are the Phoenicians, have been going there for at least 1,000 years. So when you've got the Portuguese and the Spanish going to South America, they're being welcomed with open arms because they're thinking that they're the Irish, the Aryans, who are coming back. The spiritual part of what would have been this Atlantis civilization. although that's not actually I can't remember the actual name for it, but it's the one we've got today. Because these Roman priests didn't just rewrite all these scriptures, they've rewritten history over and over to sort of hide their sort of trail of destruction. But when you tell a lie, you've got to keep feeding that lie. So all the way through, there is a sort of, they'd be in the know, so that probably when they see the J instead of an I, because it's totally interchangeable, it's some sort of signal to them that was the year that was taken under the control of Rome, I would imagine.
I don't know, because I look at it a bit differently. I found it by accident, James. And this guy was talking about Arthur, King Arthur. And he said, what they've done is they've amalgamated both the Arthurs together, because we know history's a lie. And so it looks like there's just one King Arthur, but there was actually two. They are related, and they were probably a couple of hundred years apart. And then he said, I put this video out, I'm sure I probably sent it to you. Then he said, the first crucifixions happened here in the UK, and religion started here in the UK. So if you're going to look for Jerusalem, it was here first. Or what you call what Jerusalem's supposed to like what Jerusalem's supposed to be in the Bible for us. It wasn't. It was here.
Well, the Crusades and everything are all part of the deception.
Do you think there was any wars, though, James? Do you really think there was wars? But don't forget, there's always got to be a treaty. There's always a treaty and a treaty and a treaty and a treaty.
Well, there are always wars by coercion and deception.
Oh, yeah, they don't have to be man wars. They're just wars on paper and stuff, yeah?
Yeah, so you'll notice, if I can put it on some notes somewhere, hopefully.
Is this to do with yesterday's video about Tartaria?
Well, it ties in because Tartaria, it just means West-Westerner. It's just an umbrella term. It's basically with a.
So what does that mean when it was all over Russia? What does that mean then?
Well, they're the maps that Putin apparently released in 2015.
Well, we know what he is. He's a Romanov. So you don't want to listen to any of them because they're all the same thing. That means that Ellen DeGeneres is related to Putin as well. It's pathetic.
Tartaria on those old maps, when it's covering most of Russia and North America, is probably indicating the areas that are not under the control of Rome.
Oh, is that the medieval time? The medieval time?
Well, we're in a medieval time now, aren't we?
Yeah. But you know what, James? I went to the garage to get my car MOT. This bloke started talking to me. He knew everything was a lie. He didn't want 15-minute cities. He understood about flat earth, the whole thing. And I was like, wow, because he said, are you all right? And I wasn't, because I was thinking, if my car needs some work done on it, I can't afford it. But luckily it passed. But we had this half an hour wowie chat, and I was just so pleased. I wanted to record him, but you can't do these things all the time. But I was just so pleased that this Joe Public started talking to me, and he was where we are.
Excellent.
A stranger. And then I started a new job, and the man there knows that everything's wrong. Another person that knows that things are very wrong. He doesn't trust the government. And I don't just mean the Tories, it's all of them. It doesn't trust them.
Yeah.
So people maybe are waking up. I mean, we thought they'd wake up because we're living on a flat thing or whatever it is. But they've woken up through the last 3 years, and then they keep doing things. And maybe people are noticing it now. It's one thing after another. So no wonder anybody can grasp anything or even learn any history, because in front of your eyes. Oh, we're into Russia now, and then tomorrow, we'll be on to England or America. It'll just change. So they keep that story going, and the people aren't learning or watching what's really going on. They're just frightened 9 times out of 10. Anyway, carry on, James. We've escalated over there. We're back there. Carry on. On your
so
notes.
the Roman invasion of Britain failed. You've also got earthquakes and things. I think it's about 523 AD. Then you've got in 525 or 526 AD. That's when you get the AD calendar is concocted and then backdated.
So where's the 1,000 years they've added then? Everybody talks about that.
I'll get to that. So,
okay, sorry. Sorry.
So that when you get to 1154 AD...
and they would have built Notre Dame. And if they could do things like that in the 10th and 11th century, Tartaria is just one of those things, isn't it? It's just a progression. If they could make those churches like that in the 10th, 11th century, come on. These people were well advanced then.
Right, 1154 AD is the one and only time you've had an English pope.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Right.
Oh, now wait for this. His name is Nicholas Breakspere.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
The man at Shakespeare was a flipping pope. Oh, my God.
No, Breakspere with a B.
Right, so what's that mean then?
Right. Nicholas Breakspere, the only time in history there's been an English pope. The reason he was made pope was to then entice Henry II of England to turn on Ireland, who was not, there'd never been any conflict between the two. So he was sort of bribed, and it's like, well, think of the riches you're going to gain from Ireland. This is where grain and barley and everything else, it's a fertile land. So that was also would have gone with this science. And
I think I did that
wisdom.
in my video, because it's a bit like this time where they say the potato famine is killing everything off. I could see these things where they were at ports and they were selling their seeds and that, and I was thinking, well, in the video a few years ago, I said, well, look, okay, the potato famine's taken, but because they're saying how poor the Irish are, but on the other hand, they were still trading. So how could they do that if they were beaten by the potato famine? So there was other things going on in Ireland. They weren't just doing potatoes. It's just so annoying that what we learn. Because this bit is digressing, sorry, but you know, we always thought when the Tsar of Russia died, he died with his wife and children, and that's not true. Well, the new history is the wife was injured, but she was kind of like a nun nurse. Excuse me, I've had a cold. She's a nun nurse, and she was bandaging people, but succumbed to her wounds about 5 days later. Now, when were we ever taught that? You and me have not had that history. Why would it change now? But now she lived nearly a week after her husband, and she was bandaging the wounded.
I don't know anything about that, actually.
No, it's on one of my videos I've made, but I'm just saying, when you look at it, and now they're changing all the history. You know, like, I wasn't expecting Putin to be a Romanov. You know, that changes everything. Come on, everybody. Prince Philip, the Queen, that means Harry, William, they're all related. You need to realise what's going on. Carry on, James.
This is why Henry II was enticed to then go over to Ireland and basically ransack the base. That was also followed up by Oliver Cromwell, who reduced the population further. So that's when you've had the real massacres of 8 to 10 million people reduced down.
He's
to
the closest to like
850,000.
communism that we've had. That's what I grew up thinking, that he was like It was like communism he brought in. So he already had communism. But it's worse because we're in territorialism now. It's even worse. Can I say one other thing? Because I know what you're saying and I'm listening. I'm listening to it all. But then when I made one of my videos one day, I tried to make people think that we've had all these kings. Yeah, Henry VIII, right down, wherever it is. James, whatever, on, up, whatever. But most people don't realise they weren't just king of this country. They were king in Europe. And this is where it is all the Roman Empire. So he would say James the Second here, but James the Seventh or the Fifth in wherever it was. They were kings in other countries. Like the Tsar's wife. She was Princess of Prussia and the Tsarina of Russia. They had other titles, but people don't realise that. But once you realise they were kings in other countries, you realise it's the Roman Empire. Because they're just emperors. But they're not really kings. They're not kings. They're emperors. You know, like Hitler was an emperor. Putin is an emperor. They fly double eagles. You do not fly double eagles for nothing. So say, for instance, I become the queen. Suddenly I get a mound of people and I become the queen. I'm not suddenly going to fly double eagles, am I? You know, some people say, oh, don't be stupid. It's just symbols. But they're flying the same things. So, you know, I'm not even sure if any of these people are real anyway, James, now. But they're just on our televisions. But they're flying double eagles. Double eagles means they're emperors. So we call them kings, but they're emperors. And what it is in our country, they're called kings, but they're not. They're emperors. And then I did a video. I mean, I don't know if you saw that one, but I think it was Christian. He was absolutely amazed. I couldn't believe it. I even got lost in it because I took so many pictures. There has been thousands of emperors.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. So what it is I know what you're saying, but it's actually, they're called kings here, but I think Mercia, they were kings, or were they all emperors? But then there's always the top emperor, or whatever. But they once you're king here and king in Europe, you know, a bit like Prince Philip was Prince of Greece and Prince of Denmark. And of course they got ousted when the Romanovs, so that just shows you, doesn't it? But see, he was part of that Roman thing, and he would have been king in both countries. Do you think it's because even though we've got these televisions and they keep us on them, they're not explaining the real history or how linked and how related they all are? Because that means Ellen DeGeneres, she is related, Ellen DeGeneres, to everybody in our country. Camilla, Charles, the Queen, nearly every actor you can think of. So if they had royalty in America, Ellen DeGeneres, she definitely would have been at least a princess. But they don't have royalty over there. They have actors instead, so they do it for you. They do it for them. You know, here it's the royal family, there it's actors, and each country's got its bit about where someone tells it to the people and the people believe it. But Ellen DeGeneres then is related to Putin. It's pathetic.
You've got several layers to that side of things. You've got often talked about the family lines, but then you've got another layer beyond that. So again, it comes back to the Roman Church again.
Or the religions, which we call religion, and it's religions, which would then be back with the Roman Empire again. So religion, so it was just another, it's a bit like, well, that was part one, and this is part two. We're calling it religion, but it's religion.
Well, it's the relay of the jinn, basically. So this second layer you've got, which would be all male priests, it doesn't matter, that it's anti-family, so they will operate in, they're sort of the minion level up to it. You basically got a giant filtering system. So this is very much what schooling is all about. It's looking to pick out certain individuals, and it's also that one can be bought off with greed. That one can, all these things are all. It's a very complex plan. It's a sifting and sorting process. Again, this comes back to water on this. Imagine you're in this world of 1,656 years before the sort of biblical Noah's flood. So the waters are above. You don't have rain, you don't have seasons, you don't have sunlight, you don't have moonlight. You have an ambient radiation and purple skies, and you've basically got like a tropical rainforest environment. But if that water has all come down, it's now in contact with minerals, it's in contact with grit and stone and everything, and it's going to need filtering, so it's going to need purifying. Then it needs re-energizing. This is where all the churches and things and Starforts all come into this. That's what they're actually for. But the energized water is also part of the, shall we say, the good side as well, and part of it.
Well, James, do you know what happened the other day, right? They got Northern Lights over Stonehenge. It's been on the news.
Well, someone said to me that they can be seen all over Scotland, but I've not.
But you know something, it's a bit different, James. Because what it was is I went and had a look at it and I couldn't believe it, because they always show us the Northern Lights as green. But the lights that hit Stonehenge were red. And they had a tint of orange in them, or yellow. So, you know, we look at the colours of the rainbow. Sorry, Chair, I'm changing it a little bit. I have got this video to do. I've got it. I'm going to make it. You've got the rainbow, and I hadn't even thought about that, James. You know, you've got purple, and then on the outside you've got what is it? Purple, and then you've got red. Or the way it goes. Well, I hadn't even realised, right? The purple side of things is shortwave, and then when you get to dark red, it's long wave, and that's radio. But the one before that, which fits what was happening over Stonehenge the other day, if it's true, but it was on ITV, I don't know if you can believe any of it, but people filmed it, is orange red, and that is microwave. So you know what that is. HARP.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then they had snow yesterday. Was it you that said? No, it was Mickey told me about Wales has had loads of snow. But it's probably to do with that. It was them, because they could actually now tell you the time and the day it's all going to happen. And how can you do that? What a load of rubbish. So I thought that I'm going to make the video and show people the charts of like how they do the spectrum and then a rainbow. And it's the same thing. And when you look at it, you've got long wave and short wave, because obviously the one that's at the bottom of the rainbow is small. And then when you get to the outside of the rainbow, that range is longer. Yeah. And it fits in to the charts from gamma rays, you know, the whole thing right through to radio waves. And radio waves are long waves, but the first lot are short waves. And the one before radio waves is microwaves. But that's not good, because if you can see that red in the sky, that's exactly what they're doing. And we live in that. That's our atmosphere. It's being microwaved. It's different, you know, over Greenland it's got to be green, but here it's red. And you do get these spectrums, because the sky spectrum of a rainbow, you're going to get one of those colours. You could even get purples, blues, because it's in the rainbow. It's in that spectrum. Because it goes, very often when you've got, like, say, microwave, it's coming out of yellow and going into red. And then when you get to radio waves, it's red going into dark red. So it's always got two colours in there. So even when you've got microwave, I can't remember what colour that was now. I think it was green. It might be green and blue. And it goes on like that. They're two colours together. Yeah, I just thought that was crazy, because... and something else, James, I want to tell you. I know we're diversing, because we're going back to your subject in a minute. But we watched me and Mickey on the television. Whoops. But we taped it, but I could only get one of the things onto the computer. So... about less than a quarter of a mile away from Stonehenge, they found all these pits, and they kind of make a circle, but there are some missing. These pits are 5 meters deep. I just thought, wow, when did we ever hear about that? Suddenly now, all these pits are there. I mean, I wonder whether they're to catch animals. I don't know what they're there for, but I've done a video about that as well. But that's crazy. Oh, so it was the pits. Now we get the microwave lights. I never even looked into it all. It just worries me, James. Microwave, that is not good.
Well, that's what it's designed to do. Because how many years have we had radio broadcasts? How many years have we had television broadcasts? They're all broadcast through the air. But you've reminded me of something you said about harp. What's the one musical instrument that is always associated with Ireland?
A harp.
Yeah.
Do you know what? They've left a word out because it's research. So there's the R is research. The A, you won't believe it, is aoral. And what is it? What are those things called? Those lights? The Boris lights. What are they called? The Aurora Boris lights. So all they've done in harp, in one of those letters of one of the A's, is add an L to it. So that's what they're. Excuse me. What? Oh God. That's what they're messing around with. I want to say another word. Fucking around with. That's what they're messing around with. Is all that.
Well, the other name for a harp is a lyre. This is all part of this coding. It's as much a coding for them so they can remember what lies they've told.
One second, James. 1 second. 1 second. I'm just going to stop this just for 1 second because I'm just going to stop it for that for once. Come on, stop. Yeah, I just had to show James a little bit of what I was doing, or tell him about what I was doing, the microwave thing. But I'm going to make that video. But we're back now with that little man and his cross. So carry on, James.
Right. So with the sort of remnant of Atlantis and this personification of the sun as Iesa.
ISIS or Iesa?
Iesa.
I've not heard that one before.
Isis comes into this. Well, Iesa is basically what the Great Pyramid of Giza is.
Oh.
It's multifunctional because of the mathematical things it contains in its measurements. Everybody uses Sir Flanders Petrie's measurements. They are accurate to, I think it's 1/10 of an inch or something. But it's a countdown clock. It's an architectural representation of man. So whether anybody physically went into it for some sort of initiation ceremony at one time, I don't know, but you've got the temples right near them. So basically, if you take the sort of Christian sort of teachings of moving up and to the right, if you were to look at the pyramids, they gradually get taller. The other big pyramid, which is not quite as big as the Great Pyramid, it's to do with the way the land is. But that would have had a silver cap on it.
We have, for that one, I do speak to someone called Angel, and all the pyramids are on different land levels, but what it is when they worked, everything inside, they all matched up, they all lined up together inside, whether a pyramid was smaller or taller. That's really strange. And he's going positive, negative, neutral with those. But I had, until Angel said in a hangout a few years ago that they were all on different levels. And so this is why they can somehow this is how they match up. Everything inside matches up. So all three of them match up inside. If they were working, they'd match up, but they're different heights. Crazy. Don't you think it's crazy? Like, it's just, you know, when you think about when those, you know, like, some people say they're not very old now, James. Some people say they're very old. But they knew, even if it was a couple of 100 years ago, they knew how to build them because they're still here. And they built them, you know, he's worked out they match in the middle. Everything matches to what it needs to do. So they could have worked together because it would have just matched. The whole thing was just finely tuned. So these people would have been amazing then, wouldn't they? It's not just, hey, let's make a triangle, call it a pyramid. It wasn't about that.
Well, the clue's in the name. It means fire in the middle.
Yeah, because our angel feels, because he'd like to build his own lot of pyramids there, because that's what he would like to do, to see if his theory worked. But everything he see, it was that they were breaking the gases down. They were making all the different gases out of oxygen, even maybe helium.
That is one of the functions of that Great Pyramid. There's a important part missing inside, though. So whether it would work or not, I don't know.
Yeah, they've broken bits, and what really annoyed him was, so for Granny, he's going, just so Granny could get up there. They put steps over things, so they camouflage things, and then he showed us a picture, like, say, even last year, it was fine, and now it's been broken. So they're constantly taking the thing apart, really. And he doesn't even believe they all had flagstones. He thinks it's all different. But, you know, if you took the flagstone off one of them, it probably would start working again. A bit. But there's even, like, with the little pyramids. A while ago, you could go in one of those. Now they've blocked that off as well. But he's going like, thank God for YouTube, because you can find a video about it. So I've saved that now, so I've got proof that there you go, you used to be able to go in there, and that's what it looks like. And there's different levels of water in there. It was all about them separating the waters. Do you understand what I mean? Huh?
Well, basically, you've got a...
Because you'd have had steam, gases, water, thick, you know, dense water, heavy water, light water, gases, the whole thing. So he thinks it's more like a station.
Well, yeah, it would have been to do with re-energising water, for definite. As we've moved forward in time, as it were, after different cataclysms and things, and different destructions.
And then when the Egyptians inherited it.
Well, yeah, they did inherit it, but the shape of the structures has changed and become more simplified. I mean, basically, all these old world churches are your water re-energising machines. Yeah,
so when they when they put the gravestones out the front on a higher piece of land, and they're all fake, it was underneath there, wasn't it?
Probably. There's probably operational things on some of these buildings. I mean, there's a public sort of explanation of, or a public side of it, where they say they decommission the church, but there's two. It's on a different type of commission when it's energy harvesting. So I imagine
that's the saddest bit, that they've taken all that away, James. I mean, think about it. Everyone's got to think, if you were making energy out of the air, that's the same air we breathe.
Well, all these old churches, the towers have all got an earthing strap, a copper strap that comes all the way down and disappears into the ground. They say it's in case it's struck by lightning. But is it really?
They've been put on there to stop it doing what it did.
Quite possibly, yeah. Quite possibly to earth it out.
I put a little video out. It wasn't mine, James. The man said, look at this church. It looked like there was great big plugs outside. And he was going, it's such a lie. That is not to stop the thunder. I put it out about a few months ago.
Anyway, so...
Yeah, back to the bit, James.
You've got all the names in the Bible, like Abraham. It basically, the Ab again comes from Gaelic, it means father. So Abraham is described as father of all nations. What basically the Roman Catholic Church has done has basically stolen everything from Ireland. The reason they've really persecuted Ireland the most is because until you can put enough time to separate over a few generations, otherwise people who can speak Gaelic Irish would recognise the names and realise they're conflations of Gaelic words.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if you saw that one when that guy was explaining that Ireland actually was independent and somehow it got taken away. And when they gave it back to the people, it almost looked like the original copy, but they'd taken things out, and the bits they took out, and it made it, like instead of being independent, it was actually you have to talk to the monarchy. That's who you go to. That's your boss. And he was talking about the Gaelic words. He said in the first copy, when it was Ireland as independent, it was there. The second one, it wasn't. And a lot of people don't understand it now. But you know what? People used to send their children there to be educated, or it was to be educated. And everybody forgets that Holland used to be the king of it all. So it's really hard to work it all out. They had the big houses and the money and the ships. And then the East India Company took over, supposedly. And then you've got the Barbary ships. It's quite a lot. You can't work it all out. You just can't. And then the maritime, like, how could you be on how could we be on land and we get into court, we go to a ship on dry dock? It's pathetic. And do you know something? Even that, James, because the judge probably can't sit in the court you are, but they put him in there, that means that nearly everybody can get their sentences squashed because it was not done right in the first place with the wrong judge, so they can have retrials. Maybe that's how some of them happen. Because people have realised that.
Well,
so basically, law is an arse, isn't it? It's ridiculous, the whole thing. And you don't even go to court to sort the law out. You go to court to play with numbers and figures and symbols instead. Commas. Full stops. And if you put it in the wrong place, you can give someone 30 years. Just by putting the comma one letter along or something. It's just ridiculous. And that's what we live in. That's
nothing new, that tactic.
The thing is, you know what, right? I've tried all the ways. You start off, ombudsman. I'm going to write to my MP. This is when I was in that world. But, you try every way. And at the end of it, you realise there's no one to help you. Absolutely no one. Not really. You're lucky if a company sorts things out. But when it comes to it, there is no MP to go to. There is the ombudsman work for the companies. They say they're not. They're liars, and they're government bodies being paid millions to do nothing. Because they make you wait years and then they say you can't help you. So what's the point of having that? That's not fair or justice. And then you realise there isn't any of that, and we don't even have democracy. It's all a bit crazy, James.
It's by design. What they do in the courts today is no different from what Columbus did. See, what stood in the way of the story they give us is that they lost the trading routes because of the Arabs. Arab is interesting because think of the colour of carob. That's basically where you get the name. Also, you've got the word Arab contained in Caribbean. So after 1491, after the last of the Moors have been driven out of Spain, now it's an all-out, let's go and have our revenge, because they're very vindictive.
So when they're saying we went to America and it was the bounty and everybody was setting up and making towns and all that, really that was just them taking over. And the people were there.
It was probably fear of a backlash and not really knowing what sort of was in the Americas, how that part of the Atlantis civilization had developed. But Columbus's first voyage, he took a navigator who's William of Dublin. The Irish had been going there for at least 900 years before, following the Gulf Stream. So
it had to be James, because in a sense, like we look back at it and they've got like these wooded armadas and you think, God, it would have taken months to sail anywhere. But at the same time, you hear, well, this person lived here and that came from France, that came from Spain, they've got rugs and that. It was a bit like an internet service without actually having a computer, or did they have computers? because they were able to get all these goods so they could have, you know, I can't think of anything, say French onions. They could still have all this. It all came over and they were trading like this. It was quite amazing. It wasn't that we didn't have the trade and the ships were sailing and all that. It was. So they're not as it wasn't backward like they said. And then Shapu showed me, no, it was on his page on Facebook. He showed that for a period, but we didn't really see them, and it might go to those kind of League of Gentlemen, probably 1700s, that's where I put it as well, metal armadas. So it was the same as one of those, but they were metal, steel, whatever they were. And you're like, wow, where do they come from? I've seen them before, but it's like, you know, you make another video and then you sort of forget about it. And I thought, metal armadas, like, when the hell were they? Because I actually think if you were going to use the Titanic, that was one of theirs as well. It was not this, you know, the pictures they show was not this. Oh, we did it, didn't we, James? It wasn't this beautiful, great big ship. It was this rusty old heap thing passing through that looked like people had painted it 1,000 times. It wasn't new, was it?
No.
When it left Southampton, it was all. Yeah, it was just weird. It was old. It was not this beautiful, and it wasn't even that big. They make it look so big, don't they, in the video, in the film, with Kate Blanchett, or whatever her name is. What's her name? Kate?
I don't know.
No, wait, it doesn't matter anyway. But it wasn't actually that big a ship.
About 900 foot, I think.
Yeah, but what you get now is 17-story, probably 1,000,000-foot long ships now. But, yeah, it just boggles my mind. It all, to me, you look at something, but it always leads on to something else, James. But anyway, we're going back to yours with the little man. So what happened to the Mayans and that then? So basically, they probably had to leave because there was poisoning and they never went back, sort of thing. Because, you know, we probably have a lot of abandoned stuff here, especially maybe industry and that. But in America, they have town upon town. Like in Nirvana, there was one there, size of Las Vegas. That's gone. How do they do it, James? So they got rid of these people. Or do you think they went to the extra land that they haven't told us about? You know, they moved on.
I'm getting to that.
Oh, sorry. Carry on.
So 1492 onwards, you've got this drive westward. This is not to find another trade route, as they tell us, because that could have easily been done, but it was Rome that actually declined any peace treaties and things. So they basically concocted this story. So what Columbus and the first Spanish and Portuguese have done, when they've arrived on these islands, they've basically read out something saying this is proclaimed under a bull by the Pope and the King of wherever, that this land is ours. We claim this. And of course they can't speak the same language. No different from what they do in the courts today. So you're actually looking at the start of this. And now this is a very conservative estimate. I would say it's probably a lot higher, considering the evidence of the civilizations that are in Central and Southern America that they're now rediscovering. But it's a minimum of 100 million people. Now the thing is to ask,
Wow.
the term, the story they give us about Columbus thought he'd got to India, that's deliberate. If you break down Indian, it's in, die, an. An means on, which means light. So it's, from a perspective of the Romans, it's killing your light inside you, basically. Now, an Indian is from the blackest, darkest skinned people to the very lightest skinned people, which these natives were. So the Cherokee, for example, are quite light skinned. The darkest skinned, they're the ones that they were taking. If the ones that they hadn't killed, what was left, they then took over to Spain and Portugal. That was the
You know
start.
what? You know what you were saying about the Indians, and how does that work? Because really, they're Eskimos, and they've come down. All the Indians, they're all Eskimos. Well, you know those people they've all got teepees. They're in Russia.
No,
They're in Russia.
all.
They're in Russia as well. They're in Canada.
You've got with the Atlantis story, you've got 5 races, and you've got the whole spectrum basically under the umbrella term of Indian. But moving forward, as we've got into these sort of colonies with North America, the first slaves were not slaves as such. They were what are called indentured servants. So you've got the whole mixture. You've got...
yes, James, and we did that. I was with you when we did that. When we did the asylum stuff in America, that every immigrant that came in, I'm sorry, I'm going to just spell it because I can't say it, Niger, all immigrants were called that. That's how they did, isn't it? All immigrants were called that word. Black, white, pink, it didn't matter what colour you were. Irish, English.
Well, the first, what would be end up as slaves, were indentured servants. So that could be voluntarily, because you need labour forces out there to work these plantations and things. So some of them would have been...
but I viewed that differently, James. I thought that they made it look like, you know, we watched the programmes, Kunta Kinte and all that, but actually they were second-class citizens, but they still had their own lives, they had their farms, they just couldn't... It was a bit like when we watched the war with Hitler. It's like, they're the Nazis, we can't go to their things. You can have all your stuff out there, but you can't ever go to their stuff and the balls and all that kind of stuff. The elite. They still had elites then.
Well, yeah. It's never...
But they weren't slaves with shackles. I mean, then don't forget we had the orphan children, suppose. Oh, it just goes on. Then we had the orphan children. I don't think they had particularly nice lives. You know, you were bought, probably mistreated. You were supposed to be educated and a few other things, but they're probably mistreated, probably sexually abused. The whole thing, it would have been horrible. And they couldn't leave till they were about 21 or something.
You've basically got what's been played out is a biblical story of Jesus is crucified between 2 robbers. Well, the 2 robbers are England and Rome.
Yeah, it always has to be us.
And Rome has done its usual thing of bribing and paying people large sums of money to do their dirty work. But all these trips by Columbus and Cortez and so on, they always had a priest on board. Every ship, they were grabbing people. This is where the term press gangs comes from, of being spirited away. But the first Negroes that went out to North America were indentured servants, who in turn got their freedom.
But you know something? You know, the original people of Africa might not have been what we call black people. There was other people there.
They've mixed everybody up, because what's actually happened is the North American tribes, some of them are very dark-skinned, so they've blurred the boundaries and classed them as Negroes when they're not. But then with the
this whole story that they were carted over here might not be true. We did work that one out, but what that was is it was mass immigration to America. You know, like the Irish were going, we were going, everybody seemed to be, let's go to the new land. But when they got there, they were quarantined and had their children taken away from them. And that might be what some of those asylum things are about. They're like hospitals with all these people in. Got to be quarantined for 6 months before you can go out there, but we're taking your children. I don't know. Remember, we did all that. We weren't sure if it was like that. It's hard to know what's the real truth, and there's always another truth. But carry on, James. I'm interested. It's made me think.
Right. So the whole Middle East area, you've had a different type of war going on where basically they can rewrite the history, apply these names to different places. So people are thinking this is all the biblical thing is happening in the Middle East. But on the
Well, we
old
already
maps,
know
you'll
that
see,
down in California and that we've got Bombay Beach, and also there was Baghdad. I can't remember where that one was now. Down there, and of course they've been sort of been, although they still, that you can find it. It's kind of not in our history at all that these in America, all these names, they had the whole lot of. It's like they had the whole world in America. The names, London, Paris.
yeah, what they've done is basically taken the names from the Americas and applied them to places in the Middle East to add to this confusion.
What, you think it's that way round? Because I did that video, I don't know if you saw that one, where I went for, I think it was Dallas, that one. Oh, it's a county, that's a town, isn't it? But anyway, I showed that they had, it took me nearly an hour to show that they had changed all the names of the towns. And then you think how many states America's got. I mean, that's a colossal change, James. Changing all the names of the whole of America.
Well, yeah, what comes into this is the so-called Civil War. The actual Civil War is against the 5 nations that were there that were putting up resistance. Washington is known as the village burner.
Yeah, but that's really strange because it used to be called New Amsterdam. So the Dutch were there first, and then the stupid argument. Well, if you don't change it to New York, which was York was an Englishman, we're gonna have a war. Oh, let's change it to New York. I mean, not even that's pathetic. But there did seem to sort of be the Southerners. They seem to be more probably more the original Americans, and the ones that came around New York and all that, they were the immigrants. I don't know, it's just hard to work it all out. I look at it sometimes and you can spend hours on it, but you don't really get anywhere. There's still another 1,000 questions not answered. Because you think, how long ago really was this? Because I actually thought that Henry VIII was where this big change happened. We had the War of the Roses, which you can't work that one out either, and these kings were in and out and in and out. One was French, so that's Roman. So there was something big going on then, but, most people don't realise that Henry VIII, although he was King of England, was another emperor. No, they're just emperors. They're just part of this Roman thing. So when did that start? But, supposedly it was when Notre Dame Church was built, that was pagan time. That was the 10th, 11th century, so they're saying. I don't know, but I didn't think it was that long ago. I thought, yeah, okay, it could have all been here and then... I wonder whether they brought people into all this land for mining, and all the mining stopped before we were even born. Really, I know they talk about mines, but and that might be why half of Scotland went into the sea, because they were mining and they caused this big collapse. You don't know, do you? We just don't know the truth anymore. But I thought, yeah, what we are is we're the great grandchildren of all these people, the miners. It's a bit like, Antarctica is the land, obviously it's frozen, but it's a bit like, what's beyond that, or what is it, or we've got to capture it. The same thing happened here. It's like the miners came in, and then we're all the farm from the miners. We're just the family years later. And they've moved us around, like, we've done the bloodline thing, who is actually English or American? Just look at your bloodline. You'll always have some Italian or Russian or European or English. You're never just going to be American. And nobody's just going to be English. What's yours, James? Scottish, isn't it?
What's that?
Your bloodline, isn't it Scottish?
No.
What's your bloodline then?
I know what part of it is.
Go on then.
Pretty good idea.
Like for me, right? But I know even that's crazy, James. I went to my parents and they started showing me, and in from the 1800s, this information. So it was obviously quite a long time ago. they brought up this stuff about my family. My mum had no idea. She always thought she was just Welsh. But in it showed that the Welsh had come from Scotland. And in it, one of my family members crowned the King of Scotland, King David II or something. He crowned him, and after that, he was an archdeacon, and he must have been a Knight Templar because he was racing all over Europe and around, and he lasted about another year afterwards. But after he crowned the king, after that, all kings were crowned by an archdeacon. But I was like, no, because I thought all that it could have not been real. But there it was. The paperwork was done in the 1800s, like 1886 or something. And it said that my family member, that's where it started with him. He crowned, I mean, I don't know how we came from him, really, because he was an archdeacon, or maybe he had children, I don't know. You know, they can do what they like, can't they? But he obviously was a Knight Templar, but he crowned the king. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, well, I didn't really want to be that close to royalty in the first place, but that made it like, well, how much closer can you get to crowning the king? Anyway, so my mum, it started in Scotland with him, and they'd gone then to Wales and spent obviously a few hundred years there, and then my mum's family moved to Hove. And my dad, so his mum is French, his dad, I'm not saying completely, but French blood, German blood, and they were both Jewish, and my granddad has a bit of Scottish. I don't know much about my nana, but then their family moved over to England, and of course, down the line, they've met each other, and then they moved to near Brighton, and then my mum and dad have met. But we're all immigrants, all of us. We don't come from where we live. What about you?
I was going to say, coming back to this, you said the word Jew. But again, that comes from Gaelic. It's U-I-L. It means blood.
Yeah, I was a bit shocked, really, to realise, you know, when I was younger, oh, get the flag out, I'm so British. But really, I don't come from here. And that might be why sometimes I've really struggled with English men, because I'm not English. You know, Europeans, they seem different with their wives, a bit. I don't know, I'm just... yeah.
I wouldn't delve to an identity which clearly has a history of plunder and pillage wherever it's gone.
Can I ask you then, do you have any foreign blood in you?
Yeah, the Italian, allegedly.
There you go, see? It's crazy that though, isn't it? Like, everybody's just been shunted around. For one reason or another, the people are moving. Oh, maybe it's good to go to England. Oh, no, we need to go to America and explore America. I don't know. It's all a bit crazy, James. But you know what? You know, like you're showing this little man here. So I said the Mayans. They would have had so many traditions. And once you start moving these people around, maybe the parents carry it on. But, you know, like people who come here, say, from India. And then what it is, but they're wearing jeans and that, and then their children will be wearing jeans, and in a few generations they've lost a lot of their traditions by moving to another country. I'm sure that's one reason why they do it as well. Like that's why they keep moving us on.
Well, one of these Portuguese documenters from the 1500s noticed when you get into the sort of Mayan area, he said they have some strange customs which are almost identical to Hebrew.
Right, yeah, I know what you mean. That Jewish bit everywhere. I've heard of that, even in Africa. So what it is it can be called something else, but when they look at the ceremonies that say they're having and they're having, they're almost the same.
Yeah, well, this
So
is.
they just haven't educated us properly at all, have they? Because they could have just told us the truth about things. You know, you can't have. You know, it's a bit strange when you think that the African people, their ceremonies, are quite like. Yeah, so they're like the other countries, the Jewish or whatever. They're the same. They've got the same ceremonies, but not called anything similar. Called something completely different. And then you think it's something completely different when it's not. Crazy, isn't it, though?
What they've done is blurred these different terminologies. Hebrew also means one from the other side. So,
oh, right.
you're a Toltec, the Irish would be called to them Hebrews.
Hey James, I've got to stop you now. I just realised something. I was looking at your little man, and it looks like he's got a cross on his back, but it is like it is the cross like out of the Union Jack.
Well, they've usurped everything. But you on the one side, the good side, as it were, is sort of progressing towards the rising
That's because
sun.
we might have had corners and things. You know, once you say it like that, the words like "there," "oh," "from over there," it sounds a bit like we're on that star map again with the corners: Australia, the Pitcairn Islands, Africa, and South America. And that's that thing he's got on his back. That's the cross. That's the crisscross. Those are the edges of what we're in. That Union Jack thing on the top. But I took it that, first of all I was thinking, oh, he's got a cross on his back. And he has, but it's like the Union, you know, it's out of the England flag. It's us again, that cross.
No, it goes back to this original spirituality that would have come out of Atlantis. What you've got left in South America.
So what is Atlantis then? Tartaria, really?
Tartaria means Westerner. So from a perspective...
So how does that work when we've all got the same buildings? You know, that bit of what we call Tartaria, though, this big... We've all got those buildings.
Well, they change over time after each cataclysm. The best example I could give...
So how long has this been going on? Like, for millennium? Millions of years or something? Because I just took it that really it was... Something had happened. It's a bit like we're a film set. Right, everybody's dead and gone. And then Henry VIII turns up. But you know what? When I was younger, I was watching this documentary and they said that, obviously, there was millions of us. And then an imploding volcano happened. At the time, I was thinking, oh, that's what killed the dinosaurs. But what it was is the hourglass of life went, they said, so small that maybe only 500 people lived. And we come from that 500 people. Because it nearly destroyed the place. I mean, that would fit into maybe why Scotland disappeared. You know, we've had electrical arkings. There's so many things. But, God, it just goes on. Sorry, James. But that was crazy because there was an hourglass. And, of course, the hourglass is out again now. But we went to almost nothing. They didn't say when, though.
You've got significant events. You've got 3439 is the arrival of these. They weren't actually called Anunnaki. That's a recent term, but the Anuna. You've got the Great Pyramid of Giza was started in, I think it was 3185, and it was completed 90 years later in 3995. The reason it hasn't got those alabaster white blocks on it is because it was underwater for 300 or so years.
Or it was never meant to have them anyway. That's what Angel reckoned. It was, you know, everybody says, oh, these stones are missing or have fallen off and everybody took them. It never had them, he said. It was supposed to be the way it was.
But they found them.
But again, I said to him on our last hangout, I said, do you know what? Because now he's explained it, how all these gases and water are going around this thing, and then there would have been, you know, like, water would not, I mean, like in tunnels, and then some of the water might have even come outside, and I'm thinking, I said to him, are you sure this wasn't like one of those World Trade Fair things? And that's what you were looking at, and they made it, and this is all the waterfalls and the fountains and everything. You just don't know, do you, James?
It's for energising water and separating gases, most probably.
Yeah, so he said a bit like a station. But then I've thought, James, you know, it reminds me of Total Recall when Arnie, like, we've got to turn the air machines on. And I actually wondered, maybe the canals and the star forts were to sort the water out, and the pyramids were the air, and this is how they made us, and this is the remnants of how they made us. I don't know. Somebody had to make us.
Well,
We
we
can't. Or what are we? Just a blob in the middle of nowhere. We go on for it. The land and the people, because they keep giving birth and giving birth. They go on forever, but it's nowhere. I don't get it. Where we are. But then we live in fantasy anyway, don't you? With space and all that crap and television, films. It's all fantasy. To keep because we're going to die. That's one thing. We don't talk about that enough. But it's just fantasy, isn't it? It is. Yeah. But I am really interested in what you're talking about, because I didn't know that quite about Ireland, except with Ireland, actually, the bit they took away was that loads of people used to be educated there, so it was obviously a lot more refined than they said it was. So the potato famine thing don't really fit in then, does it? They were poor then. How do they get from that to everybody's being educated there?
Because that was the centre of this, what would be...
Yeah, so Ireland was a lot more important then, basically.
It was a spiritual centre. It's implied by the name Era. It's the Aryans. It's the ones that have they've got the sciences, the arts, the learning. When you get to the time of the potato famine, this is after Ireland has been totally decimated. See, with this original church...
What's that? What, the 1700s you're talking about then? Like after the League of Gentlemen, where they were all in, and pneumatic trains and all this stuff. And do you know what, very quickly, I actually think now that, you know when they show us the old coal trains? Yeah, those are hundreds of years old. They're not the 1800s. They're much older, because we had trains then as well. So they've lied about that. So when are we really talking about?
The potato famine and everything comes much later. That's
what I'm saying. That makes it, we're out in the fields, we've got his bags, we're so poor, we've got potatoes, we've got rags and little huts we live in. At the same time, they've probably got trains, electricity. Yeah, Ireland is trading backwards and forwards, so making money through trading with seeds and all sorts of things going on, because I filmed it, I made a video about it. That doesn't all go in with the potato famine? They're all poor and they've got to leave Ireland. Do you see what I mean? Were they far more advanced than that, than just living in huts and potatoes, or were they poor people with potatoes? And because I just think that everybody was far more advanced, and trains and electricity was hundreds of years ago, because we've had free energy. It's always been free energy. It doesn't just turn into it. Anyway, yeah, now they make us pay for it. It's all crazy. And then, we've had Mercia. Well, how long was that? Really? And then, remember they said the Pic people, they had tattoos. Well, when you think about that, you think, God, they show us the Maoris, but that would have made the Pic people much more, they would have been covered in these tattoos. So they would have been at least the same as the Maoris. But actually, they said they'd never let a Roman in. But actually, the Romans did get in, which is about what Hadrian's Wall's about, and there's another one above it, which we talked about earlier on. So they did get in there, and you're thinking, well, how could they go from these people that were totally tattooed, or could have been the Romans, again? But then I blew my mind, because, you look at the Romans, and they've got skirts on. Well, what do the Scottish wear? Skirts. They're all part of the same thing. You think you've got different things, but you haven't. You've got the same thing. Yeah, okay, Scotland, it might be material. Well, we don't know anyway. I just think anything that's got a skirt on is a Roman. So the Scottish are Romans. So when they said the Pic people didn't let them in, and the kilt is a Roman thing, you think, it just blows my mind a bit. Because which one is it then? Because those skirts that they have, and there they march around with their bands wearing them. That's Roman.
This is all rights, because the Picts and the Scots and the Irish, and they're one and the same people. It's just the labels that have been applied. With these colonies, as they've sort of spread this sort of influence, they're sort of annihilating any vestiges of this spiritual sun worship that was at Atlantis. They've gradually done this system of annihilation over a very long period of time. So your first slaves in the States are actually indentured servants. So it may be to pay for your passage to get there, and then there'd be a contract. So you may be having to work for someone for, say, 10 years. But then you've got the unscrupulous ones who will come up with trumped up charges and get it extended, and eventually it ends up as for life. But they're the what would be classed as the undesirables from Europe. So you'll have all your felons, all your poor people would have all been like just taken, press ganged, spirited away, put onto these
They
ships.
supposedly did that, you know, if you believe in it. It was a film. It was Arthur again. It was a different version of Arthur. It came out about 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. Arthur was at the same time the Romans were here, and they had to, every boy in the house was signed over to the Roman Empire, and he had to serve, can't remember how many years it is, it might be 15 years, and after that they were free. And that's how Arthur came, after he was freed from the Roman Empire. That's a story, it's a film, but I was like, wow, I've never seen that one before.
But that's basically the indentured servitude.
Yeah.
So over a period of time, and there are court records on this, especially like for West Virginia, the Negroes from Africa who were started off as indentured servants, who then got the land, and some of them had large plantations. It's cleverly disguised because what they put down as whites is actually Arabs. That'd be the Muslims and things. But when it comes to white European people, they're put down as Christian to hide this. Now, where they've also confused things, the very dark-skinned native North Americans are classed as Negroes. So by bureaucratic genocide, they've killed off their heritage, which really affects all of us.
Do you know what? Do you know something, James? When you go back in history, there are certain parts where there is a lot of history, and how did they keep all that if everything was written? They were far more organised than they tell us. They had to be to get the cotton thing, you know, the cotton industry, you know, the, what do you call it, the East India Company. They had to be. This was all organised stuff. You can't just...
Now, this side of it is the Scottish Florida West India Company that is running this side of things. But if you look at
and
the
that
Mississippi,
turned into the maritime law.
If you look at the Mississippi, you'll see it's got the word ISIS contained right in it. It matches the biblical description of the Garden of Eden and the river with a four. That's the only river that does have four tributaries that come off of it. That's where the whole Bible story is talking about, that Fertile Crescent. It's also, you've got Guatemala.
Oh, I see. So what you're saying is they've placed everything in the Middle East, but actually it's all to do with America and England and other. It's complete opposite. Oh,
Yeah,
so why did America have all those names, but then they now are in the other countries, like, you know, Baghdad Bay, say, in wherever that is. San Francisco's one. Can't remember which one it is now. Los Angeles, maybe. That's the other one. That's maybe one is. That's Baghdad Bay. And then you've got Bombay. But they sound like they're Indian and whatever. And now they're in those countries. So how did they take those names and put them in those countries? Well, it's just crazy, James.
Well, Rome has always had a policy of ignorance and darkness.
Because you're sort of saying that America was running everything then.
This is why they outlawed anybody being able to read the Bible. And you have to then go to the Muslim records, the Quran and things, that they will sort of fill in a bit of the picture to this, because Europe was decimated. It's had several earthquakes and things, so they didn't keep records. But then you have this Renaissance. The real Renaissance is this Church of Ireland is starting to make headway again, but of course then it's been totally annihilated. Now it's turned to the Americas and get rid of any vestiges. And in the process, they've managed to...
Oh yeah, and don't forget, America is Mercia with an A on it.
Well, it comes from Amaru.
So that's crazy, isn't it? We had Mercia, and then we get America, which is just another letter added.
Yeah, but it comes from Amaru.
And that train of Hitler's was America, but that had a K in it. Still called America, but it was a K rather than a C. Sorry, just little things I spotted. Carry on, sorry, carry on.
It's an invented better, but through this whole elaborate scheme, they've actually worked it really well. So they're pitting one group against another. So what were the indentured servants and what became the slaves, which were the whites? It was then turned round. So when you get into the from about 1798 onwards, I think it is, you start seeing the free the free Negroes are actually starting to lose their freedoms. So they're then eventually classed in...
is that when we get independence, which is the corporation to the UK? But is that when that happens? That changes it again?
Well, it's never really happened as such. It's probably an on-paper thing. I mean, it's such a bizarre story that these founding fathers all decide, oh, we're not going to pay taxes to England anymore. And it's like, there's hardly any sort of real sort of trying to hold on to it.
Supposedly they got a lot of their goods from the East India Company, which England ran then after Holland. And so it's like it means that they wouldn't get a lot of the goods, so it would be starving the people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's crazy in itself, because we've looked at things, we get everything from America now, don't we? It doesn't come from us, it comes from them. Well, or it has done.
But the actual idea with the indentured servants, in some ways, was a good thing. If it was like, well, to pay for your passage to have a better life, sounds really good, but it was left to these shipping companies to sort everything out. So greed comes into this. So instead of where you've got a plantation set up for, say, 50 people, but now you're flooding it with 150 people, you've straight away got a problem, because you're obligated to feed and clothe them and give them shelter while they're working for you. So it's this short-term, I can get more money by transporting more people. I mean, they were just grabbing people at one time. Ireland was hit particularly because of this whole thing with the Gaelic, which Greek and Hebrew also are related to, because the names...
Yeah, what about Welsh? That's one of the oldest languages. It's older than Latin and all that, and it's just sometimes they can have about 50 letters in there. No A's and B's. You've just got letters. Like, wow, what a language that was then. That's quite Gaelic, isn't it?
Again, it's a Gaelic language, but an Irish Gaelic and a Welsh Gaelic couldn't understand each other. It's been separated off enough over.
Well, I think it's really strange that when you see these languages, none of us would understand it. Yeah, that's the language, and our language has changed.
That again is done deliberately, but.
And again, what was it? Do you know, when we hear about it, when they were deciding which language would be the world language, I think France nearly won it, but England just peaked them. And it's really crazy because that's the language of the world now, is English. Yes, us again. I suppose it had to be because the Queen ran everything and owned everything. The Commonwealths, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. But she just owns everything. Well, the monarchy owns everything.
Well, they're all connected into it anyway. Just have a look at these notes here.
We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. I know I butted in a little bit.
Yeah, so basically you've got this. This is why England's history around the time of this alleged King Arthur is so vague, and the same with Ireland. It is deliberately vague on purpose because of what was going on. This is why you have these rewrites. It's like, this is thanks to Michael Seidel.
Oh yeah.
To create a new version, you have to alter a minimum of 10% to get the copyright. So that's almost like an open admission that it's still being rewritten.
Yeah, like I said to you, now in our history, the Tsar's wife died nearly a week after he did, but that's not what we were told.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I made a video about it.
What I find amazing is that no matter how much they've rewritten it, what still comes out of the Bible actually makes perfect sense if it's read in terms of human psyche and as an inward thing. Because it's like saying, let's go out and paint the town red. It's not to be taken literally. It doesn't mean
it's a bit like having a self-help book, but it's taken too literally, and it actually says in there it's allegory about 4 times.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. It's sort of it's all in there, but this is why they're very careful to only read certain passages.
If you look at this man in your picture and he's got a cross on him, what is he? Jesus, or what we would have called Jesus?
Yeah, it's basically Iesa. It's a spiritual story. It's the personification of the sun. It's a mythological
a bit like
thing.
Enoch, then.
Well, Enoch and Quetzalcoatl and Jesus are all one and the same. It's all the same character. It's because of all these silly rewrites.
Right.
This is all to hide.
I wasn't sure about Enoch. I just thought, but now I've understand a bit more about him or what it was, and you've been to my house. I know that the sun comes out. They come out of gates, or what he called gate. What they're in there, he's called them gates. So I'd say they come through these gates. I've seen the moon appear through one right in front of me. It just came out as if it was coming out of the curtains, like curtains were opening up, and then it came out. And many people have said, "Look, I'm watching the moon, and it's disappearing in front of me." Because you can only see this thing for so far, and then, most people think the sun sets every day or goes off, but it doesn't. I've been driving and it's been there, and 2 seconds later it has disappeared. Because it's just got to that edge of whatever it is, and it goes, boop, it's gone. It's crazy. Gates. And then, I went to the petrol station with Ellie, and when we came back, the moon was there, but it wasn't there when we went.
Yeah, it's quite fast moving. Actually, we've got a new moon coming up on the 7th, I think it is.
Yeah, the one I didn't like, right, is that I used to go to work years ago, and you go to Cold Ash and you go up a hill, so it can't be as high as Coombe Hill, because that's the tallest point in southern England. But we are going up a hill, and then I drove about another 5 miles on top of these hills, and there I was working in an office there, and when I got there, the moon was there, but when I came out, it wasn't. So I was driving, and then I came over this hill back down Cold Ash to come down, and there was the moon, and it was sort of below me. It was not way up in the sky. I could see it. It wasn't there until I came over the brow of the hill, and there it was going in the sweep, which goes past Coombe Hill, and the sun goes off west. So that moon went down this track, and then went right. There's no way these things circle. They're on circuits, these things.
Well, they're on Skytrack.
Yeah.
If you can imagine, it's like sections of girders up there. It's like a mesh.
Yeah, we can't see, but it is. Yeah, I know what you mean. So, what's he called? He's called, I'll think of his name in a minute. But he says it's like buckyballs up there. But he also said that's what he thinks NASA's attached itself to. So it's not in outer space, it's just up there, above our heads. And they've attached themselves to the tethers of, because they have. Anyway, that's what he reckoned.
Well, it's probably what they're having to use all this energy for. To keep this construct going with this veil on it, as it were.
I mean, I thought about it as well, James. When you think about it, you know, you've got the ombudsman, so that's a government body doing nothing and being paid for that. But a lot of the jobs we've got, you know, like I'm a cleaner at a school. So I'm employed because of the school. So the dustmen are employed because you've got rubbish out. The police are involved because it's looking after the people, well, supposedly looking after the people. You know, restaurants cook food for the people. Do you see what I mean? So where's the money?
Well, you're not actually earning anything. You're just exchanging your time.
Yeah, do you understand what I mean? If it wasn't for the people, a lot of the jobs wouldn't be here anyway. A lot of people work for the people. The nurses are working for the people, supposedly. The doctors, you know, those people. It's all for the people. The council, for the people. Do you see what I mean? It's like, I know that you've got something, well, a corporation called Amazon and the rest of them, and they're making digits, but a lot of people working in there, and they're because people are buying the stuff, so it's still working for the people. And then they'll have cleaners and cooks, and it goes on, but it's all working for whichever way you look at it, they're all working for the people. So without the people, there wouldn't be any of these jobs. Oh, sorry, we'd have to have people, wouldn't we? But you get what I'm saying. I just thought it was really crazy when I thought about it. You know, the trains are going for the people.
It is, but at the same time, you've got this government, or any government, that is helping itself, calling it national insurance and taxes, and taking a lot of it. Because you're not actually exchanging your time and for whatever rates an hour, you're not keeping all that money. It's being taken in various ways.
No, James, you can't keep it because you've got council tax, gas, electric, whatever it is. You've got so many bills, the money comes in and it goes out again.
Well, yeah, that's to keep everybody busy so they haven't got time to think. You've also got an infrastructure that is based and encouraged to be very material, where this is why they've really gone out to annihilate the tribes of North America, because their civilization structure was such that you had no incentive to steal anything. I'm not saying it didn't go on, but if you're part of a tribe and you steal 3 horses and then you're shunned by the tribe, you've now got a problem. You've got to feed those 3 horses. So you haven't gained anything. You've actually just lost your community. And there's nothing to say that the next tribe would accept you either. So you've exiled yourself. So I would say that was a foolproof way of doing things, but clearly not, because they've been decimated. But from the perspective of Rome, we're all Indians. We're all the opposition. These labels are applied by them. It's like the Welsh only get that name. It's said to be the name that the Saxons referred to them as. So it's not even their original name. So they've totally flipped the script on everything, and then they do it in such a way over a long period of time, so you can keep continuously playing one group off against another by getting them to identify with certain things. But the true picture is actually really interesting when you start looking at these things. I mean, Florida and around that Gulf of Mexico, you've got a huge Greek community. I think it's about 60,000, but if you type in Athens in the United States and see how many comes up, it means library basically.
Yeah, I understand, James.
That's
When
all.
I was in Turkey, right, we went to this Greek ghost town, and they didn't have any roofs on. The buildings were there, but no roofs, and you can go and wander around it. But I was really, at the time, it's years ago, I was really shocked. I thought Greece was here, so they're all doing it, aren't they? Backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards.
And that would have been taken there when Atlantis was still in existence, those oldest structures. But then, as you lose,
Do you think the
technology,
Starforks were part of Atlantis?
yeah, what you actually get is like in the scene called The Tale of Captain Walker. You've got these children that this Captain Walker had rescued on like a Boeing 747. They retell the story of how they got there, and they're actually being totally honest in what they're saying. But the problem is they have no understanding of technology. So they're relaying the story of saying, some say a gang called Turbulence brought the plane down, some say the wind just stopped, because they don't understand it needs fuel. And so when Mad Max turns up, they think he's just going to magically start flying this plane and catch the wind, as they call it. They don't realise you need a runway, and this thing needs to have wheels. But they're telling it from a perspective with no knowledge of a previous civilization technology, and this is why you have this progression of buildings and things getting smaller. From the oldest ones are massive. So with a knowledge and a technology, you've then got to the old world structures, but then look at the buildings today. You've only got to compare how basic and cube shaped they are. There's no intricate detail. There's nothing aesthetically pleasing. But if you look at an old building, you think, why do they put all that detail around the top where you can't really see it and appreciate it unless you really look at it? But this is in a time when there's supposed to have been less people and things. But this is all down to these rewrites, because they basically reclaimed things. A really good question that was posed was, okay, if these buildings are part of this Tatarian civilization, how come the North American natives never mention them? And that's like a fair question. Why would they not mention them? Well, that will be down really to your lifestyle and that you're in. If your life revolves around chasing grazing animals.
But you realise, don't you, James, when it comes to it, that everything's propaganda. Look what they've told us about the Russians and how they treat the people. But when you work it out, they've treated us worse. They're saying, oh, it's Russia, and they've got everybody afraid of Russia. Yet, in reality, if they do nearly join each other, why don't they just kill each other off there and get it done? But they won't, because they're all related. We're all part of the same family, playing the same game. It's treason what they've done.
You've got to have an enemy to fight, you see.
Yeah, but they've made the enemy. We might have turned into narcissists nowadays, but we're peaceful people. They locked us down. There was nothing happened, did it? Nothing. We all stayed in our homes. We're peaceful people. We don't need a war.
Anyway,
America's still flying a war flag. And when you think about the United, the Jack, what do you call it? What was it? The English one?
Union flag.
That's Union Jack, that's it, yeah. When you say Union Jack, that would be on a warship, at the front of the warship. So a Union Jack is a war thing. And we're still running it.
Yeah.
So England and America are not at peace. But who are they fighting? They're fighting the people.
Basically, yeah.
And lying and pretending. When I saw Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi were the same person, it's like, well, now we know that didn't happen either. This is ridiculous. And then he turned into, what was it, the mayor of New York. Oh, God's sake. It's like, they're all, ugh. Anyway.
Yeah, so these old buildings and things probably sat derelict for maybe hundreds of years. And if you're in a tribe, you probably may have a memory that they were ancestors of past civilization, but they've become sort of sacred sites, and you just wouldn't go on them.
But that is weird, isn't it? The houses we moved back into, but the pyramids and things like that, and the settlements like that, we totally abandoned them. That's the bit I feel really sorry that America doesn't realise. They've got all these towns and that, but if you like when someone's stabbed and they put that dye in there and it shows if blood had been in there, that kind of thing. I wish they could do the same, but the bit where it shows up all the abandoned bits, they'd be horrified to see how much of America is abandoned.
Yeah. Well, the pyramids and things are a much older age.
Yeah, but everybody's got them. Everybody's got them. I took you to one. So everybody's got these things. It's disgusting, isn't it? It's disgusting.
Well, the other thing is, with these old buildings as well, that would have sat derelict, they'd be of absolutely no use if you're chasing herding animals. They'd probably regarded as sacred sites, and nobody went near them because they've lost the ability to heat them or lighting or whatever.
But you know what? They could have had it. They didn't need boilers because they were probably getting it from the ground. They put rods in. It would have been eco-friendly. It's coming from the ground.
But the time you get to the natives, that would have been no use to them. They wouldn't have the technology. They wouldn't have the memory.
So how much time are we talking of? Thousands and thousands and thousands of years?
Oh yeah. You've got the one with the dates. You've got 2239 BC. You've got another one in 1687 BC, which was probably the Mediterranean one. And then you've got 721
Do you believe that happened,
BC.
James? Because I did that one on a video showing that the Mediterranean was all plugged up and it dried out.
Well, there's said to be something like 300 cities under the Mediterranean.
Wow.
Sort of vanished. They were just gone in a day, where this water has just annihilated everything, and it sort of hopped across and formed like the Red Sea and the Black Sea.
It's amazing to think how we could have survived from that. I mean, maybe when we said it was empty, maybe that's what happened with this cataclysmic thing. It's just destroyed so many bits. It was a bit like after that, everything would have been broken, and you just probably for a while, everybody just got on by themselves.
You've got an event that's happened in the last week or two in Turkey with all the earthquakes. It's funny, it's sort of hit an area where they found all these underground cities, but you'll get it on the news where, against all odds, 3-4 days after this disaster and a building has collapsed, there's still poor survivors out there. There's always survivors. So in all these cataclysms, there's probably always been survivors.
But you never know. Like with Ukraine, they were showing things, but when I looked at the footage, I thought, okay, the car is on fire in the car park, and that makes a war. It's just one car. So they can do that, can't they? They can make it so that basically they have had the earthquake. It's a couple of streets, and that's it. It's like the whole of Turkey now has been in an earthquake. It's a couple of streets. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying they've made it look much bigger than it really is, and made it now the news, and we're watching that for days on end. Because don't forget, they want the global catastrophe. That's what they want. Global. Everything's to do with global money. It's not to do with looking after the place, because the 15-minute cities, because people can't get into Oxford when they do it, they're going to have to drive around, and it's going to cause all these bottlenecks. It's already started because they're already sort of putting it in place. So they're saying, well, if it was about the fumes, well, it hasn't worked already. So it's always for other reasons, actually to take our freedoms away. It's nothing less than that. People need to wake up about the 15-minute cities and go and look them. Everybody's going to get trial runs of these goddamn things. you know, they're not elected for this or selected for this. They're just doing it.
Well, they cause a problem by doing this, which they say, oh, look at the pollution from all these vehicles. So that's a perfect way of...
After they put us in vehicles, you know, like, people are starting to notice, like, well, yeah, diesel was the best thing. Oh, no, it's petrol. Oh, no, it's electric. You know, people are noticing the shift. And then, you know, in the 15-minute cities ones, they're saying the infrastructure just isn't there for everybody to have an electric car. So what does that mean? They don't really want us in cars? 15-minute cities is about, you can't go any further. It's like, I mean, you know, we've talked about, you know, they've said for as many years as you can remember that they never wanted the German thing ever again. But they're doing it right in front of your eyes. That's what 15-minute cities are.
Well, that's all right if they are going to provide employment within.
Well, it won't, will it? Because it's going to put businesses out, you know. Well, it's going to make transport more expensive because they've probably got to, you know, they're travelling and they've got to then be fined and go through all that and include that in their haulage. And then it's going to put businesses out that depend on people coming to visit their shops. And now because they're outside their 15 minutes, they can't go. So it's going to put a lot of businesses out. Who wants to live in a place that you can't travel more than 15 minutes? I mean, maybe that's what lockdown was about, is a trial run.
Probably, yeah. These things
This cannot happen. This cannot happen. What do they want? They want us in shackles, is that it? I mean, I feel like we're in an open-air boot camp as it is. And I'm wondering whether they mine us from the moment we're born to when we're buried. Because, you know, supposedly our bodies, our hearts make gold. So that's where they get the gold from. It's from us, our dead bodies. So it's like we're just, you know, that's why they take the people away and then in 200 years we'll be mining it and we'll get the gold. I don't know, it's just crazy. We're just mined all the time, James.
Well, yeah, it's all harvesting human energy. I mean, is it coincidence that during childbirth, if the head is pulled, it snaps a nerve called the vagus nerve. But you notice they use the term vagus to do with material wealth. So these words, it's like no coincidence on these things.
I also think they've totally lied about that, and you brought that up. So I suppose it sounds a bit, ooh, but a baby in the stomach is a different thing, and it kind of has to die to come into this world because it's living a completely different way. That way has to die for it to be born and breathe air. That's crazy. I never really thought about it like that till you told me.
Yeah, you have to be reanimated. Well, they give you the clue because it's a certificate of births and deaths on the birth certificate. It's not a certificate of births. Whereas the death certificate...
Yeah, that's why they do it, isn't it? It's because actually when we're being born into this world, we've died from that world.
Yeah, it's also, don't forget, it's written in legalese. It's not written in English. It's to create the false persona as well. So you become this piece of paper. And of course, we know where all these registrations end up as well, in the Vatican.
Yeah, that's how they get those bank. Anyway, it goes on and on, doesn't it, James? James, we've been going for 2 hours now. Have you finished or got anywhere near, or was because I talked you're nowhere near the end now?
Well, it's really just showing how through deception, misappropriation, manipulation, steering one group and influencing one group against another. This is how they've managed to pull this off so far. So
they'd have to be pretty organised and stuff for that. You can't just say, well, we're going to take America over. It's going to take us 6 months to get there and do it. Yeah, just do it and let it happen. You know, these people were well organised. Look what they've done to us. They haven't even told the Americans the truth. They think they're celebrating independence. But they're not. They're celebrating a corporation that they won't want to be in if they knew that's what it was.
they've also got the uncomfortable truth that probably most of them started off, their ancestors were indentured servants as well. See, when this all sort of started to change, it then got shifted to
Do
Australia.
you believe in the
context.
giants then, James?
Do I believe in them? Well, they're just bigger versions of us when there's more oxygen, when we've got a different atmosphere than now. That's all they are. And then beyond them, you've got the Titans. See, with this, in the world before...
The buildings don't say that, though, do they? I mean, I know the buildings are big, but you still couldn't say a 20-foot person lived in there because they're not that big. But they are big. I do find it... What was it? The bigger the room, the more money you've got or something?
Well, the buildings come much later. I mean, the era of the giants is before 2239 BC, or the Titans. Then you've got a general decline in height because less trees. You've only got to look at the...
Yeah, but you know what, James? I thought about that because you know that I used to live in Inkpen and I took you to Coombe Hill, and they said that, you know, they used to walk along Coombe Hill and it goes up, it's a ridge of hills which goes up to Oxford, and that's how in the olden days, obviously when we were in huts and stuff, that's how they walked around. But when you're standing up on Inkpen, I'm thinking, if the trees were in the way, how big were they? It's quite high, isn't it? I just don't understand. We've got trees. When you look down off that hill, the trees are right down there. They're not huge, great things. They haven't grown, and we've got these like redwood kind of trees. They're still really small, and they're down there. Do you remember?
Well, you've got the named trees, the Syracuse trees, which are sort of just under 300 foot. But if you look at the early photographic record and film footage, and then you look at the pre-photo age commentary on trees, you're talking 400 and 500 foot. These have all been decimated, so consequently there's less oxygen, so things aren't growing as big. But if you're
yeah, because I don't think people realise that the clouds are actually that low. They don't realise, I mean, especially here, we're a bit higher here, but I suppose we watched, didn't we, when we were in Inkpen, that we saw a cloud go up and over Inkpen, because it's quite high there, and then it went down as it was going over the hill. I didn't realise, I just thought the clouds would be the same going across, but they didn't. Some of them were changing, weren't they, James? We saw it. Because we realised with the mist in the sky that we were actually sort of in a cloud. It didn't feel like that, but then we realised that. I don't know, yeah, it's all crazy. Crazy. Everything's crazy.
In the era of the Titans and the Giants, you would have had basically something more like a tropical house. You would have had a purple sky and ambient radiation. You wouldn't have seen the sun. And the original moon would have been like your daylight, because what the thing we've got there now is not the same one. I mean, there is a time with some of these ancient people, they talk of a time when there was no moon. So there's a memory of that between these various cataclysms and things.
Do you know what I find really weird? I've told you this before. When you can see it racing through the sky, you can actually see it moving in front of you. It's racing to do its thing where it goes and picks these stars up and it moves them in the sky. And that's not even talked about. Nobody, not even Dave Marsh, nobody mentions it. I saw it twice a few years ago. Because you have to, obviously in England, you have to have a clear sky and it has to be night. And sometimes when it hits the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer, it might be 12 o'clock in the day. You're not going to see it. But it was just right at this time. It was night time. The sky was clear. And I saw it. And what it was is I needed Stan Smith's 360 camera at that time. Because, if I had that, we'd have seen whether the rest of the stars move around or whether it was just bringing those ones across. I don't know. It's crazy. No one talks about it. No one. I can't believe it. The moon moves the stars. Nobody knows about it. Somebody told me to go and look, see, and I couldn't believe it because it came from the west. From the east. It always comes from the east, and it was actually going quite south. Still going west, but going south more than west. And then he said, I was on the phone with him. He was going, wait, just give it a few minutes, just wait. And then we could see that the moon then started coming back, so it was going kind of north. And then it sort of hit its track again, and then it went west. It kind of dropped the stars off, picked them up, brought them back, dropped them off, went west. And I was like, oh my God! I was like jumping up and down on the landing because it was right in front of me.
I don't know. I haven't looked into anything like
I know, and it's really difficult because it's like, well, we don't see it like that, or are you sure? But I did twice in 1 month. You have to know when the tropics are happening, when the moon hits the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and once you know where that is in the month, because it'll do one and then the other, that's when it moves the stars. So that's twice a month. But it would kind of have to, wouldn't it? Because our seasons and everything. The stars play, I don't quite know the part they play, but the moon is moving them. And it never, people think, oh, the moon is just circling. There's no way that thing circles. And it's on all these different tracks. And does all sorts of different things. Does more triangles than circles. I don't know if you remember, it always had to go to the road. In my perspective, it's obviously not the road. Wherever it is, however far, it's not that high or anything, but the moon and the sun always kind of go, they never go over my house, they go to the road next to me, in my perspective, and then it goes across. I mean, you can never get to them, can you? The more you drive towards them, they just stay there, the same distance. It's weird, that, but anyway. Anyway, James, 2 hours, 10 minutes. So, we're carrying on.
Okay,
Let you finish, sorry.
I could say, so the missing 1,000 years, if Rome was started about 752 BC, that takes us to 1752 AD, which is when the Gregorian calendar comes in. So probably that is the marker for when they decided that this Irish church has been completely destroyed, no trace, no memory of it. So you've got the one side that's doing this benefactor side. So when you're talking about Quetzalcoatl, he's teaching the people in South America how to farm, agriculture and things like that. So that is the complete opposite of the Church of Rome, but is keeping people in ignorance.
I've got to say something. I did the videos. Catholic, Methodist, Evangelical, the whole lot, they're all the same thing. How they did it was they just changed where you got your sin from. So the Calvinist Protestants said the sin came with you, and Catholics, they believe you get your sin when you come here. That's how they broke the churches up. They're all part of one. It's the same thing. All the same thing.
It's a perfect. You'll have one group saying ours is the true way, another group saying no, ours is the true Bible, and so on. It's a perfect divide and conquer again.
They're all the same thing. Don't ask me why they had to branch out like that. Because Sven, he said, I just can't believe it. He said, I'm like, within a mile, there's 14 churches around me. It's a lot of churches, isn't it?
The negative sides cannot create. They can only misappropriate and take something that's already there. So they just flip the scripts on a lot of these things because there's nothing original about them. There's nothing original about anything that's played out today. It's highly predictable.
What, a rerun, you mean?
Everything is basically a rerun. Time is not linear, it's cyclical. You'll get events that play out, and very similar events that play out around marker years. It's just working out where those markers are. So
yeah, because they use astrology. The one thing that they tell you they're against or make it look like it's stupid is the one thing they use.
that's so obvious, because why hasn't Easter got a set date?
Yeah.
Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon in Aries, I believe. Something like that, anyway. So if that ain't astrology, and also you've got this story of these three magi that are following the Star of Bethlehem, so they're tracking a star, so that is astrology. So they can't say that one either.
Well, churches started off as being that they were marking the sky. Didn't have us involved in it at all. But then when we get religion, which is religion, and about, I don't know, about Henry VIII's time, they got turned into something where we go to church, and then suddenly the churches seemed to own all the land, and the people worked on the farms for the churches and had to go to church. They might not have even wanted to go to church. And then and then this lot came in and took over, and then that lot came in and took over. It was one of Mickey's videos, Miss Davenport was explaining this, how, in the churches it used to be one way, and then, say, the Calvinists came in. I think that's why I looked up the Calvinists, because suddenly the Calvinists took over. And this was all going on, if that's true.
Well, another thing that's often mentioned about these old buildings where they've got scaffolding around them and it looks like they're just being cleaned up. Well, what about the insides? Because I thought this was a good point mentioned by Static in the Attic about Rome. It's like, why would at this height of Rome sort of basically burning anybody for witchcraft and heresy and all this, and yet all these paintings have got like these ancient Roman gods and things on the ceilings. It's like, well, that doesn't fit the narrative either. I thought that was actually a really good point. It's like they've restored some of these things once they've decided what they're going to keep and twist and manipulate to give their version of events. So it's just amazing what comes up out of this. But yeah, you've got tie-ups between Greek, which comes from the word creek, which again puts us over on that Florida basin again. You've also got the Fertile Crescent, so you've got a crescent shape, and then you've got Texas, which is the lone star. So a crescent and a star together, you'll find on pretty much every... I
don't know the whole shape of everything, but the land is like a star. We don't even quite know how it goes because they've lied so much about the shapes and the sizes of the countries. But yeah, that would fit in. And it would fit in with what Gillian sees because she's in one of the legs. But that doesn't mean we're just a star. We're on something else, so that could be bigger, whatever. But the bit we're in is like a star, I don't know, and then the Union Jack fits on top of all of it. Remember, I've done those ones. Yeah. I couldn't believe that. Because, the easiest one is Jamaica. And if you look at it, Jamaica live on the crisscross of the star map. And they do. And they've got a crisscross which is in the Union Jack, like that one we're showing now. And so Canada, these places, they all live on the crisscross. Africa, and then you'll find the flags in them. So there's lots of different sort of countries in Africa, but you'll find where they, most of it will be on the crisscross. They'll have a part of that flag in their flag, just like Jamaica gets it, even though it's different colours. And I couldn't believe that. It doesn't matter whether it's crosses, crisscrosses, lines, triangles, because the Union Jack's got triangles in it. This is a triangle here, see? In the Union Jack, you've got a border around it. So these become triangles. Lines, it doesn't matter.
But it's all symbolism, the whole lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every logo, it's all got meanings to it. It's like Ulster with the red hand. Ulster basically translates from Gaelic as Jew, which is the U, the UL, and star. It's also where we get the word fuel from. It's from the Gaelic word for blood, which is fuel, which is also where you get the word Jew. So it means of the blood. But of course it's been twisted round and flipped over to apply to a different group than it actually is. Basically, a Hebrew is one from the other side. So if you're in the Western Hemisphere, you refer to the part that's post-Atlantis that's over the other side. But it also means basically a priest. But they've been very careful to sort of merge and blur all these terms to confuse things. That's how they operate. You tell a lie and then you have to tell another lie and another one. But they've also got, because when it becomes that complex, they've also got to have a little code for themselves. So hence the I and the J, because they are interchangeable. I've seen the number 4 expressed as 3 I's and a J. It's like, well, why not just put 4 I's down then? But yeah, it's these political that have been used. They wield enormous power, and very sort of central to it all. This is why all these things are done behind closed doors, and you can see that also with politics as well. It's just an offshoot of the priest class. So nothing's changed. They just update the setting in which these things are played out, but the same tactics are used over and over again, and it's mostly misappropriation, all ways of hiding being, and then playing one group against another. They've done this since time immemorial, by the looks of it.
Well, I want them to go, James.
Well, the only way to do that is just to sort of keep exposing what they've done, because once you see the patterns with the things, it's like it makes it a little bit easier to not get caught up in it all.
Do you know what? I don't know, I'm a bit miffed, really. I mean, I knew he had to be. But then when I found that, I mean, you don't know what you're going to find when you go researching and things, because you know that there's always their story. And it was like the second one in, there it was, Putin is a Romanov. So he's related to the Queen, he's related to Ellen DeGeneres, he's obviously related to Trump and Biden and Yishi, the one that's there now, and Boris and all the actors and Prince Philip, the Queen, you know, it goes on. Prince Michael of Kent and his wife, Prince William, Prince Harry, he's related to all them. And really, I just want them to go. It's embarrassing. I think they're really embarrassing, and everybody needs to wake up and do their own research, because once you do, you come across things.
That's another part of the nature of this reality. Whatever you look for, it will present to you.
No, you don't always find what you look for, and sometimes it takes you somewhere different. But I wasn't expecting him to actually be a Romanov. And he says, well, they said we wouldn't get back in, but we did. I mean, you know, everybody hates Putin. You're only hating your monarchy's family.
Well, I can't say I hate him.
No, you know what I mean. A lot of people hate him. I mean, if you asked me to listen, if you said you've got to listen to either Trump, Biden, or Putin, I'd pick Putin. I'd rather listen to him. He doesn't insult people. But it's just awful, because the other day I watched, he sort of got 5 countries to sign up, and he's got their Russian linked again. But NATO won't agree with it. And you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh my God, just a load of rubbish. You know, they're going to make it a war of some kind. But then me and Amy looked up the Cold War. All those years they said we were in a Cold War with Russia, sort of a standoff with them, when they were actually putting military stuff into Russia, and it was called COVID.
Well, it becomes
so
somewhat
that
ironic.
means military.
It becomes somewhat ironic when you've got the Polish Prime Minister demanding that Germany sends tanks. It's like, they wouldn't have said that in 1939.
Yes, but we're not supposed to be in those times. But that's what they're doing to us all.
No, they're not doing anything.
The time
They're
is
offering
now.
script.
Please leave. I want them all to go. I really
They're
want
not
to go and
doing
stand
anything.
outside the BBC and tell them to go as well. Get out.
They're just offering scripts. You don't have to take them.
Research 15-minute cities. Once you realise what that is, you won't want it. I mean, I was thinking, James, how do they work this out? Because obviously there's a problem with going, say you've got sick parents and they're not in your zone, they're in another zone. But how's it going to work? Say you've got 15 minutes. But for someone up the other end, that might be half an hour or 5 minutes. How do they work it all out when you're in a zone? Because for a lot of people, they're not going to get 15 minutes.
Well, as I understand it, 95% of Oxford were against it, but it's still come in.
Yeah, so it's not democratic. It wasn't elected. No one signed for this. No one voted for it. They need to go.
But that's the whole thing. That's all an illusion anyway. We're still indentured servants, really.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Think about it. You go to university and you run up all these student fees and things. You become an indentured servant because they've given you a debt. So they've got you entrapped. It's like, well, yeah, you've got these qualifications, but now you've got to start earning money to pay back for all those years you spent at university. So
You've got to pay back again.
Yeah. So it's.
I mean, we don't ask to be born. Well, maybe we do from the other side, whatever it is. But in a way, you get it and you think, oh, I didn't ask to be born. Oh, I don't know. Maybe some of us have come back to try and save the earth. I just think it's disgusting, We live in Super Mario. Go and watch that. When he walks, the land comes up in front of him. It doesn't curve or anything. It's flat.
Oh, I don't think it's that bad, actually.
Well, no. What it is if you have a table and you put some cups and a plate and some things on it, the bottom bit is flat, but the rest is mountains and valleys and there's beaches and gullies and there's all sorts of things. But the thing it's on is the same level. That's why a pilot doesn't have to. He just goes ding ding and then he gets there. He doesn't go, hey, but when we get to England, it's right up there on the curve. They don't have to worry about all that. They just fly straight across. Well, no, they have to go up there and around and cross, because I don't understand that either, because, that's why Africa is not sort of adjoining South America the way they say it is. So that's why you have to go up to England and across to Canada and down. That's why we're in a star, because they only fly certain ways. If you want to, if Australia is that close, why does America have to come to England to go to Australia?
Because they're not telling the truth, basically.
Yeah, so the only flight I'm a bit shocked about is that Jin lives in Japan. Japan. And it took him. So if I wanted to go to Los Angeles, it took us the same time. But if you look on a map, he's well over there. So how did he get to Los Angeles taking almost the same distance as me? I haven't quite worked that one out, but it made me then go and look at maps and then realise the sun's got to go north because Europe's actually above me, not below me. Because the way that the map's twisted, we're lying on our side. So it's just in a completely different place to what you think it is. Because they're not, you're just looking at one of their Google maps.
Without being able to go outside of it and look into it, it's not going to be easy to.
No, we're too big. They can't. Someone said they can't even take a picture of Africa. It's so big. You just can't do it properly. You can't just show one picture of Africa because it's just such a big place. Can't go into space and all that then, can they, really? Because there isn't any. But James, we've talked again, but we've been going for 2.5 hours now. Is this something that we haven't finished and we come back and do in a few days, or is it something you can finish?
I think pretty much covered it, really.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit shocking, really, that maybe, what everybody thinks is Christianity, it wasn't anyway, and it was older. It's older anyway. It's a bit crazy, that, isn't it?
But it's been totally inverted by this fake religion that seems to have started in Rome, but probably come from somewhere else.
Yeah, UK. Said religion started here. And the Knight Templars were here, and that's all part of them. And just go and look up kings, and you'll realise that, he might be James II here, but he'd be James VII in France or Germany. Roman emperors.
Oh yeah, basically. Yeah, it's still the same ones behind it all.
So what happened to the people like the Mayan people then, James? What happened to them? They just got moved on, and then they just become a part of America?
A mixture of annihilated, enslaved. I would imagine that this whole thing about the Aztecs and the sort of cutting out the heart was not probably Aztec. It doesn't fit with anything else about them. It's probably the conquistadors who were doing that. It's been like a systematic destruction of anything that stands in the way of Rome. So this is why they've got rid of any of the esoteric teachings, Gnostics, Cathars, anything that would have a slightly different view, that would highlight the lies that they tell. They basically annihilated. It's like you either fall under us or we'll murder you, basically. That's the two options.
Because I don't even think people have realised that, if you wanted to be a blonde, you had to dye your hair blonde. But now we have natural blondes. And when I saw any pictures that came out of places like Sweden and that, they all were dark-haired and brown eyes. And now they're not. They're associated with blonde hair and blue eyes. So where did they come from? And don't forget, that's what Hitler wanted. Well, that's what it was about, blue-eyed, blonde people, wasn't it?
Well, the concept was.
Well, maybe he was just introducing the blonde people.
No, Aryan again, it's been misappropriated to do with spirit and air.
Oh, no, but they didn't have blonde hair then. Blonde hair has only been around for about 100 years.
No, if you look at all the widows, it's sort of implying that. It's eternal enlightenment, but it's been externalized as a physical thing, which they always do.
It is really annoying, when you say this stuff about this, that there's another history that nobody knows about.
Well, it's possible to piece bits together. There's so many giveaways and things that sort of, it's like, well, with the history we're given, this doesn't make sense. When you can see that there are, take Hebrew comes from Hibernia, which is the old name for Ireland. Then you've got Iberia.
All these different names.
You've got Caledonian, you've got Chaldean, you've got Galilee, you've got Gaelic. These are all. See, what they often do, they take part of a Gaelic Irish word and they'll attach a Greek or a Latin ending and form a new word to try and hide the thing. But if you take Abraham, it's Ab and Ra and Ham, so it means father, son, heart, basically. But to someone in Ireland, when you still had this Church of Ireland, they would have seen that and known exactly what that means. This is why they've decimated Ireland in particular, because they need to eradicate any memory so they can put their false history over the top of it, and they can then misappropriate the spiritual teachings and claim them for themselves. This is the way they always operate, because they seem to lack creativity. They have no imagination, so that's their Achilles heel. But I feel also that is what a lot of this massive filtering system is all about. They are looking for certain people who've got either creativity or imagination because they have a problem that they can't fix because they lack the imagination. So I would imagine all this data is, well, the data collection I take to be, we're here to have an experience and take away what we learn from the experience to a sort of higher self. They've turned it into data collection to serve a different purpose, to try and identify certain people that they may be looking for to help solve a problem for their interest, not for ours, of course.
Well, I've really enjoyed that you'd talk. Oh, you're going to say some more? Because I really enjoyed you talking about this stuff today. It's made me think about some of the stuff you were saying. Because we don't know everything, do we? And every time you think, oh, I've got it now. Oh no, there's a bit more. Bit more. It's always a bit more.
Well, the further back you go, there is mystery schools and initiations. It's like, I don't know how much knowledge and how much they still use that today, and exactly how much has been suppressed. But there must be something in it that they're guarding, because they don't let anything go that they can use. So, but it's reverse engineering with this side of things, but certainly the etymology can't hide it. The place names don't hide it, and then what the things that are being rediscovered also open up new questions. So I'm pretty certain that's probably why we've had all these earthquakes in Turkey. It's because you'll notice there's another thing. If they always burn things, the Great Library of Alexandria, that was burnt, and you look at all these mysterious fires all around the world. Always like the Great Fire of London. You've got San Francisco and many other places. There's always fire and destruction to try and get rid of something that they don't want seen. But then they have a problem with a huge structure.
But you know what? You know San Francisco lost, but there are still quite a lot of Tartarian buildings there, so I don't understand that one. But I suppose in a way, once you know it's been burnt down, you think it's been rebuilt, but it probably wasn't.
Well, as I understand it, the destruction of Atlantis was over a 20-year period, and it was twice yearly. So you've got 2040 there, which might explain why we're in this Anno Domini calendar, because it's a Phoenix year in 2040. There will be things, selective things taken out, targets and things there always are. But it's a bit like playing a game of Battleship. It's like firing it until you can get the target. But you've also got current themes being played out. Well, these comets or whatever, these fireballs have come over. How long are you going to put up with another one? Because you've had the first event, then 6 months later you could say it's like a booster. You can also see it as a counting sequence. So if I was to mention 4F and 6H, it's the only way I think I can say it, really. But I think you can work out between the F and the 8 and the 4 and the 6. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. You've also got another thing since March 2020 that's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you need top-ups every 6 months. You see the pattern? Yeah. So it's
always patterns and symbols, isn't it, James?
Yeah.
James, I want to put my heater on now as well. We've been going for 2 hours, 38 minutes. I always get rid of you, don't I?
Yeah, but I reincarnate.
No, I don't get rid of James. He's a good friend of mine. Really appreciate that, James. It just makes it more complicated now because there's more history, but very fascinating to think. Never thought, it started before and it wasn't, it was different.
Doing cross-between things and looking for the common ground. That's where you find these things. It's like, oh yeah, you've got this. I mean, you look at these depictions of different deities, you'll find they've all got the same attributes. So Quetzalcoatl, is Enoch, is Jesus, they're all one and the same, but it's been through these redactions, rewrites, editings, misappropriations, and morphing it so it was from that side, but now it's been claimed by the opposite side. And of course, continuous divide and conquer when it's actually about being individual and concurring, coming to agreement within oneself.
Yeah, sort
So
yourself out
everything
first, and then you can do all this.
Yeah, that's it.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll always talk again, because we always do, James.
Okay.
So we'll talk soon, won't we? Then. Yeah. But it's been a pleasure, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it. I might have butted in a little bit, but sorry, James, because James is on a bit of a run there sometimes. I had to butt in, but yeah.
No worries.
You don't mind, do you, James?
No, I can do it again anyway, so no worries.
We're all thinking on each other, but I didn't know that bit that you told me. But I just do you think that that's more real than what you've told us today?
Yeah, we've got you've got too many things that, like with this whole tie up with the Hebrew and the Gaelic, for a start. Then you start looking at that Gulf of Mexico and what comes out of that, and it's like on the east coast of North America, you had what was known as the Micmac tribe. They wore tartan because they're descendants of Irish and Scottish. The Mic being the Irish, the Mac being the Scottish part. So there's too many tie-ups. You've got Hebrews in the tribes. You've got Hebrew practices in South America. So the term has been misappropriated.
I saw it in some of the videos. People told me it was Hebrew. It was all over the shops.
And they've even found carvings where they've taken it to a tribe elder, and he said, "Oh, I recognise this. I can't translate it, but my ancestors could." There's too many things like this that it like blows this official narrative of history out the window. It's like, well, that can't have happened if that's the way you're telling it.
But none of it adds up anyway, James. I mean, in one sense, they didn't have any money for anything, but you can go and find all these uniforms that they wore for about 200 years, and there's hundreds of them in America. Yeah. But they had no money. So how does that add up?
Yeah. Not only that, you've got all these American Civil War photos are by an official photographer, and it's like, we've just been in a life or death situation, but we're just calmly posed in front of a cannon for our photo to be taken.
And they had some weird ships in those times. Anyway, James, we're going to finish, because I need to do a few things.
Right, it's been a pleasure anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because James would talk forever, wouldn't you, James? Sounds like I'm trying to get rid of you, and I'm not, because he's a dear friend of mine.
I understand.
We've probably got another 10, 20 minutes talking to each other after the hangout.
Well, I need to go and make myself a coffee, actually.
Yeah. Well, I will, James. Thank you very much for explaining that. It's maybe a bit more confused now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that one. It's been an absolute pleasure. It always is, and I probably made you think a little bit as well, didn't I? Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you for all your time and explaining this to us.
No worries.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening.